It's that time of the year, folks, and I'm not talking about seasonal depression. 'Tis the season where we collectively pull up my drama list and try to remember what we watched this year. Yes, I'm posting this in January, but I'm going to continue referring to 2024 as this year. Hi. It's Kayla, by the way, and speaking of 2024, I'm here to present to you with my annual self-indulgent BL series ranking video. Today we have a total of 8 shows to discuss. I know that's not a lot, but hear me out. This year, I was very selective with what I watched. I had to prioritize the tropes and subgenres I already know I enjoy, because the truth is, I don't have time for all these damn shows. My short-term solution has been watching the first episode of as many BLs as I can to see if any of them catch and keep my attention. Popular ones, underrated ones, spanning across countries. I spent the holidays tapped in, and this is what I've accumulated. Quick disclaimer, some of these shows began airing in 2023 and finished airing in 2024, and some of them began airing in 2024 and finished airing before 2025. That was my criteria for eligibility this year. Anyway, let's get into it. We're kicking off this ranking with a banger. My number 8 on this list is another certified hit from screenwriter Hwang Da-sul, and that's the harrowing Korean BL, Let Free the Curse of Taekwondo. Wow, this one was triggering for me. I'm going to be discussing trauma bonds repeatedly throughout my ranking, and this series might be at the top of the trauma bond hierarchy. Let Free the Curse of Taekwondo takes place during a time when corporal punishment was an accepted form of discipline. In this setting, you have Do-ho, a high school student whose father runs a Taekwondo school. Due to this culture of violence and the fact that he's a full-on alcoholic, Mr. Lee carries out brutal beatings on his students anytime they mess up or talk back. Some of his students are Do-ho's classmates, which leads to him getting bullied for his father's actions. This is the harsh and at times isolating life that Do-ho is accustomed to, until one fateful day when a boy named Ju-young moves in with them so he can learn Taekwondo from Mr. Lee. Ju-young is a bright-eyed student who takes Mr. Lee's instruction to heart, training hard for both his personal benefit and his teacher's validation. But it doesn't take long until he's exposed to the worst of it, the abuse towards his peers, towards Do-ho, and eventually towards himself. When Do-ho finds out that his father is hitting Ju-young, he can hardly bear it, telling the boy, "I'm sorry, I just don't understand. Hitting someone, it's ridiculous." You see, Do-ho is a pacifist, and it's gotten to the point where he feels something more than basic empathy for Ju-young. At first, he was desperately trying to push him away in the hopes that he could save him, that he wouldn't get caught up in this cycle of abuse. But alas, here they are, warding off Mr. Lee's fierce temper and beating rod. When two characters are being mistreated by the same person, the resentment that builds up towards that person is twice as ferocious because it creates this weird camaraderie between the victims. What I found so interesting in the case of Do-ho and Ju-young is how vastly different their reactions to their shared trauma were as adults. When Do-ho's father dies, he doesn't give a shit, and everybody is looking at him like he's the bad guy. It pissed me off. Going no contact with a parent is common as of late, and it's something I have firsthand experience with. So the visceral reaction I had to the positive image everybody had of Do-ho's father, well, let's just say Do-ho was justified in not wanting to attend that funeral. Despite my support of Do-ho's decision to cut off his father, I understood why Ju-young reacted to their trauma by keeping in contact with Mr. Lee in his adulthood. After all, it wasn't his father who was beating the students, so perhaps he doesn't carry the same guilt that Do-ho does. It's also not unheard of for someone to cling to a toxic relationship, especially if it's with someone they feel indebted to. It's true that Mr. Lee helped Ju-young improve at Taekwondo. It's true that they bonded in their own way. For Ju-young, that was enough to say, let bygones be bygones. These trauma responses are a great example of the human psyche and what lengths your brain will go to in order to protect you. I love the way this series forces you to be introspective. It's not possible to consume this story at surface level. It's easy to judge Do-ho for hesitating to let Ju-young back into his life, and it's easy to judge Ju-young for being friendly with the man who hurt them. As a viewer, you might believe that one character's fault outweighs the other, and I'll admit, I was frustrated by Do-ho's standoffish attitude. But you guys, I just really wanted them to get together. The evil has been defeated, so work it out on the remix. Now this series would be a lot higher on my list if my top 3 weren't such strong contenders. At number 7 is another Korean BL that rekindled my love for the subgenre, and that's the oddly nostalgic series, The Time of Fever. I know this is a prequel to Unintentional Love Story, but personally, I liked The Time of Fever exponentially more. This is a beautiful and tragic story, one that feels reminiscent of a time when Korean BL was just beginning to emerge. I'm not sure if that makes sense, but it's just a vibe I get from this style and quality of production. You know I love a character with trauma. Bonus points if the character is trauma bonded with another person. Dong-hee and Ho-tae are very much that. Dong-hee is physically and verbally abused by his father, who resents him for being gay. After getting kicked out, he's living in the house of his childhood friend Ho-tae, who moved away some time ago, but has recently returned for his father's funeral. As Dong-hee and Ho-tae reconnect, the feelings they've been burying towards one another begin clawing their way to the surface. I'm in love with their love story. Dong-hee and Ho-tae know each other better than they know themselves. They've witnessed their darkest times, their weakest moments. Really, the only thing they've hidden from each other are their mutual feelings of love and lust. For Dong-hee, it's simple, and that makes it all the more agonizing as he watches Ho-tae go through girlfriend after girlfriend. Ho-tae, on the other hand, isn't yet conscious of his own feelings, though deep down he's aware that the way he views Dong-hee goes further than friendship. I'm a sucker for this type of angst, where one character believes it's all one-sided, but in actuality they're both yearning so perilously that one day that facade is bound to crack. The tension this creates between them is magical. Whether they're standing in the underpass wringing the rainwater from their clothes, or lying in the warmth of the space heater eating tangerines, the energy is perceptible and fervent. And let's elaborate on that tangerine scene. Taking a bite of the forbidden fruit is a metaphor I will never get tired of. Hunger and the primal need to devour. That's what this scene represents. Their desire for each other is ripe, like tangerines in the winter, which are aptly referred to as fever tangerines. Do you see the layers of brilliance here? I lose my mind when a character is overprotective and an "I'll kill them for what they did to you" way. So Ho-tae was really tickling the recesses of my brain with his hatred for Dong-hee's father. Clearly this wasn't the first time Ho-tae has had to be held back from retaliating. And what's even sadder about their predicament is Dong-hee's attitude towards it all. His rhetorical question of, "Do you have to see blood to judge if someone is hurt?" The abuse has become so normalized that even his own mother seems complicit, assigning Ho-tae with the task of nursing her son. And when Dong-hee cries and Ho-tae doesn't console him, it's representative of their unspoken love. Ho-tae knows that if he hugs Dong-hee, those years of pent-up emotions will come flooding out. Simply, he can't risk that, whether it's due to pride or fear. He's also portrayed as a tough guy throughout the series, not in physicality, but in mentality. If he cries with Dong-hee, then the mask is coming off. Neither he nor Dong-hee reach self-actualization until they're older, wiser, and most importantly, removed from the environment where their trauma occurred. As a self-proclaimed comedian, this next series had me cackling incessantly. My number 6 on this list is the underrated romantic comedy, This Love Doesn't Have Long Beans. If you enjoy slapstick comedy, situational comedy, observational comedy, and wordplay, you will love this series. It contains some of the wittiest humor I've seen in a BL in quite a long time. The writing is intelligent, the acting is hysterical, and the directing truly brings it all together. I love the filming style of this series, all the sharp angles, the zoom-ins, and the clever timings. When you read the summary for this story, you might think to yourself, how could they possibly make an 8-episode series about a chef who only cooks recipes without long beans? The concept is so absurd, but the execution is superb. One thing about me, I love Sileb and Pawn. Their versatility is something else. They went from Pit Babe to this, and I'm shell-shocked. Their casting was spot on. Obviously, I don't know them, but judging by what they share on social media, it does feel like they were playing slightly exaggerated versions of themselves. I could say the same for the rest of the cast as well. Garfield and Benz were an unexpected pairing that nearly stole the show. Having sexual tension with your physical therapist sounds just as absurd, but surprisingly, there was a good balance of silliness and angst. We also have Lee, Tiger, and On as contestants in the cooking competition. Their differing attitudes made for a very contentious but hilarious mood every time they were in the kitchen together. Out of the three, I latched onto On's character Klua. He was my poor Meow Meow, the one who deserved to win. He was also ride or die for Ob, which effectively made him Plawan's #1 op. Does he have selfish motivations? Maybe so, but you would do it too for Chef Ob. I have to confess, I did love Plawan just as much as I loved Klua. The thing about Plawan is he's so hopeless and goofy that you can't help but root for him. He doesn't believe in working hard, which is so me-coded. He practically lives in his own bubble, rejecting any societal expectations placed on him. However, you can only go so far with that philosophy, and the sad truth is, he's broke. So to leave his brokey lifestyle behind, he's willing to infiltrate this competition, scam Ob for the deed to his restaurant, and hand it over to Mr. Rich Kid Methus. It was interesting to see the ways in which Plawan's conscience slowly crept up on him as he developed feelings for Ob. The gig went on longer than it needed to, but even that was for comedic effect. Plawan trapped himself in this completely avoidable situation, so why not follow through with it, for money or self-punishment? The fact that everybody views him as a person who's destined for failure makes me want to bolster him up as an underdog champion. He's just a charming little airhead who can dish it out when he needs to. My 5th series on this list came to me at a time when I desperately needed a palate cleanser, and that's the adorable and uplifting BL series, Only Boo. To be honest, referring to it as a palate cleanser is a bit reductive, because it's so much more than that. It had the same substance and complexities as the other BLs on this list, but it's also super cuddly and warm. Kang and Moo are cutie patooties. Their love is so wholesome. I had butterflies all the way through. Genuinely, my face was sore from grinning. Moo is straightforward with his flirting, and I find it so damn refreshing. He wears his heart on his sleeve, and his attempts are persistent, but he's never pushy. He just wants to show Kang how much he likes him. There's no hidden agenda there. His personality aligns flawlessly with Kang's. He's more meek and introverted, but once Moo gets him to open up, we see he's just as head over heels as him. I love how physically affectionate they were, but also how age appropriate that affection was. Even as they grow up and go to university, they still maintain that high school sweetheart's energy. I will always eat up an idol drama. Moo's journey as a singer was so fun to follow along with, and I just wanted to protect him from any suffering or hardship. I love all the songs we got from this series, from Louis' OST to Keen's OST to the group's first single. The music production didn't feel rushed or incomplete. All the music was so catchy. Believe it or not, I was in full support of Kang when he broke up with Moo. This kid had company executives, including Moo's mother, breathing down his neck and gaslighting him into thinking he was the source of Moo's stress. No, that was you guys failing to shield your artist. I admire the fact that Moo did not care who had what to say about his relationship with Kang, and while I wish that Kang was more resilient, I also recognize that he was being manipulated by the adults. There's a cultural politeness and respect at play that makes it difficult for him to object. So in conclusion, I would go to war for both of them. Pote and Peos were a great side couple. I wasn't as invested in them, but I was still engaged every time we jumped to their story. Their energy was a lot more uneasy and wistful. Friends who are secretly pining for each other will always be a favorite trope of mine. Another character I have to shout out is Neth. She was giving me major sapphic vibes, and that might just be because Milk was playing the role. Either way, I thought she was a pretty good judge of character, a true voice of reason for Kang, always giving him the best advice. I love to see that kind of loyalty and compassion in a friendship like theirs. It's a well-known fact that I despise time skips. I think they indicate lazy writing in its purest form. However, the time skips in this series are valid. This story takes place across the span of a few years, following Moo's career as a T-pop idol and Kang's education as an art major. The time they spend apart is integral for their individual growth. They got together when they were young, and before their paths can converge again, they need to prioritize their own dreams and aspirations. Often, time skips are used like a bandage to cover up missing context, but in Only Boo, these time skips serve a specific purpose. It's a storytelling technique to showcase how the characters are maturing from their experiences and admiring each other from afar. Absence makes the heart grow fonder after all. I do have one critique of this series, and it's the existence of Shon's character. He brought absolutely nothing to the story except this weird one-sided tension with Kang. This is a grown man going after his little cousin's love interest. Is he not embarrassed? The whole subplot feels misplaced, like it was thrown in at the last minute to cause unnecessary conflict. I don't know what possessed GMMTV to cast Book in such an uncomfortable role. I love his comedic timing, I love him as an actor, but every time he would appear on screen, it would completely take me out of the story. Maybe this subplot could have worked if they cast a slightly younger actor, but even then, I still think having Moo's cousin thirst over Kang is such an odd narrative choice. I need everybody to tap into this next series and give it the flowers it deserves. Hear ye, hear ye. My people are still in the game. My number 4 is the absolute hidden gem, Maruhuyo Project. If you've never heard of this series, I don't blame you, because where was the fanfare? This is a masterpiece, and no one seems to care. Now, I know people are hesitant to categorize this show as a BL. It's an ongoing debate over representation in the genre, whatever. I'm just here to share a series with queer characters that touched my heart, okay? King reminds me so much of myself. I was that kid in school that had a strong sense of justice to the point where it made me insufferable because I was constantly protesting something. I was literally 13 years old giving presentations on Proposition 8. I would also break the dress code on a daily basis, so King truly is the cis male version of me. I feel seen. He proves to be the most lovable character within the first few minutes of episode 1. He's a protagonist for the people. A semi-omniscient narrator, he seems to be in tune with people's deepest thoughts, breaking the fourth wall to gossip with the viewers. Adrian's facial expressions are so accurate to his character's personality, and with the acting experience he has under his belt, it makes total sense. Courage is the main theme of this story, specifically the courage to speak out and stand up for yourself. It's a collective goal that King and his new classmates have yet to reach. Ino is the descendant of a well-respected historical figure, and he's expected to uphold his family name and carry on the Maruhuyo traditions. This rigid way of living makes it difficult for him to accept himself as gay. Venice is a trans girl who happens to be the only openly queer person in the village. Due to the conservative nature of their school, she endures bullying from both students and faculty. Lori is questioning her sexuality after a traumatic event, but as the mayor's daughter, she struggles to step out of the binary existence she's familiar with. Her best friend Lily is hiding a secret from everybody. She's intersex, and she feels like a monster because her parents abandoned her at birth. Lastly, there's Archie. He's an altar boy who's torn between his religion and his sexuality. Although he's in training to become a priest, he finds it impossible to reconcile with the church's strict views on homosexuality. Together, this group of friends are navigating a post-colonial society that has slowly erased their people. They want to make change, but they're just teenagers, and every time an adult strikes them down, they become more and more fearful. Seeing King, this outsider, be so unapologetically himself inspires them to be courageous. There's so much beautiful dialogue in this series about courage and love. One monologue that sticks out to me is in episode 6 when Ino and King are sharing a very emotional moment on the beach. Ino says to King, "You know, I'm in awe of you because you're the realest person I know. You're the only honest person I know. And whenever I'm with you, I feel like I become honest too. And the more I get to know you, the more courageous I get." Another short but memorable exchange occurs between them in episode 4 when Ino tells King he's in love with someone. King asks him, "How do you know you're in love?" Ino replies, "I don't know. I just feel free." This script feels really authentic to me, like the words were pulled from real conversations. I kept revisiting certain scenes just to listen to the dialogue again. There are some random details that are worth mentioning. For instance, the animations in the opening sequence are so cool, and as a history buff, I was immediately hooked on the mini history lesson. I'm also a huge fan of Filipino folklore, so the whole allegory with mermaids and queerness and the villagers being deathly afraid of the sirena felt curated to me. The music was also synchronized perfectly to the mood of every scene. I've been listening to the ending credits song non-stop. That song alone is a hidden gem. I am now Paul Pablo's biggest fan. If anybody who was involved in the making of Marahuyo project comes across this video, I want to extend the biggest thank you and congratulations in the fucking world. Thank you for creating this story and giving voice to the queer Filipino community. It makes me so proud anytime a series of this degree comes from my culture. Haters can suck it. Pinoy BL will never die. These top 3 were so hard for me to rank because I love them almost equally, and every time I think about each one of these series, I feel severely unwell. All that to say, my third favorite BL of 2024 was the long-awaited Yin War passion project, Jack and Joker, You Steal My Heart. I have to talk about the unstoppable powerhouse that is War. Anytime he's a part of a series, which isn't often enough, he carries the whole damn thing. I admire the fact that he's not afraid of looking ugly. He will weep from the depths of his soul, snot dripping from his nose, gasping for air. Over on Lovecast, we actually spoke to a director who said that many actors fear the thought of looking ugly on camera, so they cry or get beaten up in a pretty way. War would never be caught doing that. He's one of those actors who loves his craft. But it isn't just the emotional scenes he throws down in. You know how there's a movement to bring back swag? Let's put War on the front lines of that movement. His whole demeanor is so charismatic, and it makes him an instantly likable character. Forgive me for using this word, but Joke has Riz, and it's because of War's portrayal of him. Like the title states, he will steal your heart. I have to give credit to Yin as well because his acting has improved significantly since Love Mechanics, and I don't even think it was terrible back then. However, this series gave him the opportunity to showcase his versatility, and he exceeded people's expectations. Yin is Jack. He is that boy who struggles to get ahead in life, who has good intentions but harmful means. I happen to think he's very charismatic too, which makes Jack the ideal character to complement Joke. Together, they have staggering chemistry, the kind where they don't need to display affection for you to feel the tension between them. The build-up to their confession was even better than the confession itself, simply because I was devastated when the crescendo fell to silence. This series put me through the ringer for sure. One aspect of Jack and Joker that I loved was the setting. You don't realize how upper middle class these BL characters are until you're hit with depictions of poverty and the working class. This story is grounded in reality, so thematically there is a lot going on. You have the rich playing literal games with the poor and creating this illusion of choice for the sake of their own entertainment. You have the willingness of the people to scam and betray each other just to survive in this capitalist society. You have the prejudice status that comes with a criminal record and the way these broken systems fail to help the most vulnerable citizens. I've seen people say this series tries to tackle too much at once, and the reason I don't agree with that is because all these issues are interconnected, so you can't include one without including the other. In many instances, crime exists due to poverty. Debt exists due to the rising cost of living. The maintenance of power structures exists due to the hoarding of wealth. How do you tell a story about the ways in which society punishes the less fortunate without depicting the ways in which it does so? I was very tuned into the trope of found family when it came to Joke and Arun. They share similar backgrounds, not just financially, but in the way their fathers perceive them. They're both made to feel like burdens on their families, oldest sons that fail to satisfy their parents' wishes. With Joke, his shortcomings are obvious. He can't pass his medical school exam, nor does he want to pursue medicine. But for Arun, I personally believe his father's disapproval stems from the negative connotation that he's gay, and thus can't be married off to Rose in a power grab. The fact that he and Joke are established as adversaries but end up as partners in crime is so pleasing from a narrative standpoint. It's like them saying, we're both fucked, so we might as well work together, and I love a switch up in character dynamics. I also found it so healing to see Joke's father apologize for his own faults and accept Jack and Toy Ting as part of the family. That's about as happy of an ending as you can get. Inversely, I found it sad but predictable that Arun would run to his father's side and take care of him after everything he's done. At the end of the day, he loves him, and those complicated emotions are what makes the story so interesting. Another thing I really enjoyed about this series were the side couples. I might be the only one advocating for Save and Hope, but justice for them. All they wanted was to earn enough money to pay off their debts and live a peaceful life together. But instead, they became cogs in the machine, helping Boss to uphold authority over his debtors. I so appreciate the emphasis this series puts on the fact that virtually every character has had to do the wrong thing at some point in time. In my opinion, Save and Jack were both groomed into becoming Boss's lackeys. In the same way that Joke thought he was buying Jack's freedom with the ring, Save thought he was buying Hope's freedom with bank fraud. To me, Save and Hope were engaging with Boss in the same way Jack and Joke were, so I had an equal understanding of their actions and motivations. As for Tattoo and Arun's relationship, I liked the open-ended conclusion. I thought it made the most sense for their feelings to remain ambiguous. I'm a firm believer in the concept of showing rather than telling. As a viewer, you see the way Arun looks at Tattoo, the way he insists on never leaving his side, or his apartment for that matter. They don't have to explicitly state that something's going on for something to be going on. I'm not sure if Tattoo reciprocates Arun's feelings or if he's too emotionally immature to comprehend his own feelings, but either way, I was rooting for them as friends or a situationship. The final thing I want to mention is the color grading. I could not peel my eyes away from that screen between the deep saturation and the absence of my arch enemy, whitewashing. Any series where you can see the stubble on their chin, the sweat on their brow, and where they don't look blown out like a K-pop music video is a win in my book. Those series that are super manicured hold their own space in the BL genre, but there's nothing quite like the immersion these gritty, unfiltered series like Jack and Joker bring to the table. We're reaching the end, you guys! So my number 2 was a roller coaster of emotions that left me feeling depressed, dehydrated, and sleep deprived. I'm really selling it, aren't I? This BL series ruined my life not once, but twice. My stand-in. I don't know where to begin. I suppose I'll start off by admitting that I watched this series in one sitting. I full-on macrodosed this shit, and I'm blaming it on Mech because he would not stop tweeting about it, and before I knew it, I had braved my way through a 24-hour marathon of non-stop angst. I'll be totally upfront. I have not a single critique about this series. Did it destroy me? Yes. Did it have me questioning why we live just to suffer? Most definitely. And I loved every waking moment of it. The mental damage this series did to me could not be replicated by any other series on this list. Joe is a character that I resonated with immediately. He's in this constant power struggle with Tong, who's essentially taken control over his life and beaten him down until he has nothing left. His self-confidence is gone, his reputation is in shambles, his friends have abandoned him, and he's left with no choice but to put himself in a dangerous situation, which results in his death. And when his soul returns in a different body, the cycle repeats itself again. The inability to rise above your circumstances is painfully relatable. Sometimes Joe can be a pushover, simply falling in line and doing what he's told. But truly, I never blamed him for feeling like there's no way out. Tong holds things over his head, threatening to get him blacklisted, even recruiting Ming into his diabolical plans. And let's talk about Ming. Contrary to what you might assume, I loved him. It's weird because I went from not wanting him anywhere near Joe to wanting them to end up together. Desperately so. Does that make me a hypocrite? Perhaps. But this year, I've been embracing toxicity for the sake of entertainment. That being said, Ming does some crazy shit. From knocking out Joe and chaining him up for a day, to publicly sabotaging his prospective ship with Sol. Similar to Tong, he has this grandiose sense of ownership over Joe, and whether love plays a part in it is debatable. Even in Joe's second life, Ming essentially bribes him into becoming his paramour so that no one else can have him. The dude has issues. I started to resonate with Ming as we saw his character development. There was a time when he was young, naive, and in love with Tong, but then something in him snapped. He watched his sister marry Tong instead, and from that point onward, he wisened up. This villain origin story doesn't excuse his actions by any means, but it does give you an understanding of what motivates him. Frankly, I would argue that Tong is the real villain and that Ming is just another victim of circumstance. In a world where people look past him, he just wants someone to love him. I was never quite sure if he did love Joe or if he was simply using him as a stand-in for Tong, and I think the story is designed that way. There's uncertainty in Ming's erratic nature, and you see him trying to figure himself out as well. This series doesn't hesitate to venture into the moral grayness where he presides. They allow him to polarize you, and I find that so daring in this current media sphere where people want characters to be objectively good people. A story with these complexities could never be told in a self-righteous manner. By the way, I need to give a huge shout out to the costume designer on this series because Ming was always fitted. He's the type of character I would make an outfit ranking video for. The acting in this series is gut-wrenching. I have such admiration for the intensity that Up and Poom brought to Ming and Joe. These are not easy roles to play. These characters are miserable and distraught and so explosive that it scares you at times. Not just anybody can portray that. Furthermore, you have to trust your acting partner so deeply to connect in the way they do in some of these scenes. Whether it's an NC scene, an argument scene, or even a death scene. Up and Poom are too convincing. Getting to see a different side to Up was amusing as well. He's gone from comedy to romance to pure insanity, and I love this role progression for him. Poom has also won me over this year, and I swear it's not because he's strikingly handsome. I just feel like he's one of those people who were born with star power, and if you don't see it, you will in 2025. The industry politics in this series are fascinating. Tong has such a disturbing amount of influence on the people around him. This man is so lazy that he doesn't want to film his own series, the series he's the literal star of. And instead of the director shooting down his insane demands, he submits to every last one of them. He even changes the camera angles so Joe can permanently pose as Tong without the viewers noticing. Meanwhile, Tong keeps showing up late and disrespecting the staff, but no one is calling him out because he's this beloved actor who has a huge fan base. What scares me the most is how easy it is for him to have Joe's name removed from the movie credits. Who has the power to erase someone like that? It makes you wonder who his character was inspired by. The mere prospect of it doesn't sit right with me. Then over here you have Ming, who's crashing this sponsored event and hand-delivering flowers to Joe while the company is trying to promote Joe and Soul as a BL ship. And then there's the fact that missing one press conference could mean getting blacklisted forever. Of course, this series depicts a dramatized version of the industry, but if I'm being totally transparent with you, reality is stranger than fiction. If I had to choose the most memorable scene from a series I've watched this year, it would be Joe making the decision whether to live or die in the finale of My Stand-In. It's the first time in the whole series where he gets to make a decision for himself. He's told that he can continue living this life that brings him nothing but sorrow, or he can die and finally be at peace. I had to take a break while writing this part of the script because I kept bursting into tears thinking about the fact that Joe chooses to fucking live. Are you kidding me? Joe accepts the possibility that things may never change because he loves Ming so much, and he loves his friends so much, and now he's seeing how much they love him too. Oh my god, I'm a wreck. Giving yourself a second and third chance at the life you dream for yourself, enduring the misery so you can experience the joy, opening your heart to love, platonic or otherwise. These are the messages that encapsulate the overall theme of the series. Life goes on, and so do you. So before I reveal my top BL series of 2024, I do have one honorable mention. I've been debating whether to place this series in my ranking or to include it as an honorable mention because it's so special, and if you've seen it, you know exactly what I mean. Who would I be if I didn't take a moment to highlight the slice of life Korean series, Love in the Big City? The mere existence of this series is a triumph over bigotry. It represents not just art, but resilience. You've probably seen the anti-gay campaigns in South Korea that were sparked by this series. These conservative groups didn't want people to see it, but thousands and thousands of people all around the fucking world saw it. How powerful of an impact is that? You can remove the trailer from every platform. You can protest outside the Ministry of Culture. None of that will erase the existence of the LGBTQ+ community in South Korea. Since everybody has already given such thoughtful commentary on Love in the Big City, I don't have anything revolutionary to contribute to the discussion. So I'm just going to talk about what stood out to me personally. Firstly, Young and Mire's friendship is so true to life, without a doubt the most authentic depiction of real friendship. The way Mire dives headfirst into drama with boys and Young always has to bail her out is so me and my best friend coded. Out of all the crazy situations they encounter, the realest one by far is Young paying for Mire to get an abortion. You never see topics like abortion being chronicled so openly in Asian media. This series is so faithful to reality that it leaves a mark on your soul. And I know that might sound dramatic, but I promise you it's not. In the same vein, Young's friend group is just as encouraging and protective of him. Their companionship as gay men in a conservative country has more meaning than I could ever elaborate on. I just know how comforting it is to have a good group of people around you who relate to your problems and will always hear you out. Young and his friends go clubbing, they talk shit, but they're also there for him at pivotal moments in his life. Like when he's in the hospital after his suicide attempt, and they're literally leaping for joy when they see that he's still breathing. Let's quickly go through Young's ex-boyfriends, starting with Namgyu. Much like Young, I didn't feel the sting of Namgyu's absence until he was gone forever. I wasn't necessarily rooting for them to be together, but when confronted with Namgyu's funeral portrait, the loss of love hit me like a ton of bricks. I thought back to when Young made that comment about him speeding, and it destroyed me. That man died feeling like he was unlovable, and I can't fathom the what-ifs that were rushing through Young's mind. Next up was Young-soo. He was the definition of a philosophy bro, and I was not entertaining it. Come to find out, he's also struggling hardcore with internalized homophobia, which makes you feel for him even if you find him narcissistic. It doesn't click for Young until he discovers that Young-soo has been writing anti-gay rhetoric for a Christian group. Simply put, their combined baggage is too much for them to sustain a healthy relationship. After that came Gyu-ho, who I did like the most because he reciprocated Young's feelings and never judged him for having HIV. However, I didn't even bother rooting for him because I knew it wouldn't work out. They're at two different levels of maturity, and Young doesn't give Gyu-ho much grace. This was the point where I started to wonder, what if Young is the problem? What if he is searching for a love that doesn't exist? He will find one trait he dislikes in a person and become so fixated on it that he jumps ship. On one hand, it's good that he isn't leading anybody on. On the other hand, it feels like self-sabotage. Where is the line between having high standards for yourself and having unrealistic expectations of others? I don't have an answer for that. It's just a question I'm posing. Young's final boyfriend, or rather situationship, was Habibi. Honestly, I have zero thoughts on him. By the time Young returned to Thailand, he was over it. This is when he opens up about how greatly HIV has impacted his love life. He brought it up multiple times during his relationship with Gyu-ho, but I think returning to this place that held so much sentiment for them really drove that somber feeling home. In the finale, I think he's finally content. He might not be fulfilled, but he's content having the love of his friends and of himself. A selfish part of me wanted him to reunite with Gyu-ho, but this isn't that kind of story. Also, I have to clarify, when I pose the question of Young being the problem, it's not due to him having HIV. It's due to this overly romanticized version he has of love as a romance writer. And as a hopeless romantic myself, I have to confess that I relate strongly with this character trait. I want his wish for love to come true so badly because 1, I'm human, and 2, I see a bit of myself in his constant yearning for more. Numerous shows I've discussed in this video center around familial issues, so all I have left to say about Young's relationship with his mother is this. I think many people who have strained relationships with a parent wish more than anything that things could be different, that said parent could find it in their heart to acknowledge their wrongdoings and atone for it. But that doesn't usually happen. So seeing Young and his mother heal their relationship in small but significant ways had me over the moon. You can't change the past, but you can certainly change the present. And I was so happy to see them do that before his mother was gone. One last comment I need to make. I have never felt like more of a K-pop hag than when I got up and did the full choreography to Tiara's Sexy Love along with Young and his friends. I can attest to that song being a queer anthem back in 2012. The cultural impact that Tiara had on the girls and gays is everlasting. Number 1. Okay, besties, no more stalling. My Top BL series of 2024 was none other than the inexplicably iconic Pit Babe. I felt like I was in heat watching this series, which is quite humorous given the context. If you would have told me at any point in my sentient life that an Omegaverse BL would turn me into a deranged maniac, I would have called bullshit. Omegaverse is not my thing, but for some reason, this series became the exception. There's just something about these territorial, temperamental race car drivers that I can't seem to escape. Actually, I've had a thing for race car drivers ever since I saw the Fast and the Furious Tokyo Drift as an adolescent, so that might explain it. To put my madness into perspective, when this series was airing, I would watch an episode once on camera, then I would watch it again right after filming, then I would watch it again right before the new episode came out. And when I wasn't watching every episode 3 times in a row, it was all I could think about. I would pop in my AirPods and maladaptive daydream about Pit Babe all day long. I would write graduate level dissertations about the societal implications of Pit Babe. And to top it all off, I would give my poor mother weekly rundowns on every episode. My use of the word deranged was not for comedic effect. The thing I love about this series is how crazy it is. Like, what do you mean this guy named Tony is human trafficking kids and training them Stranger Things style? And his star pupil is a famous race car driver who is also his adopted son, who he's trying to impregnate with his best friend? Try explaining that to a normal, well-adjusted person. Something I really needed in 2024 was more fun, and this series provided me with that. It had me laughing at things that weren't meant to be funny and scratching my head at things that were supposed to make sense. I wholeheartedly embrace this series for what it is. A melodrama. Tell me this isn't a series you would watch reruns of in the middle of the night. It's giving X-Men mixed with Days of Our Lives. I've never been so enthralled by something this outlandish, horny, and confusing before. The plot was captivating in the most unexpected ways. I was genuinely shocked by the plot twists, especially the reveal of Way working for Tony and the reveal of Charlie faking his own death. For a minute, they had me fooled into thinking they killed off one half of the main couple. I mean, no one is safe in the Pit Babe universe. Other than the storyline full of twist after unhinged twist, the real selling point for me was the ensemble cast. I've talked at length about characterization and acting prowess, but just this once, I'm granting myself permission to be shallow. This cast is hot as fuck. I call this series My Magic Mike for a reason. When I lay eyes on Pavel and Supernut in those racing uniforms, I transform into the most animalistic version of myself. But let's switch gears. I do in fact want to talk about acting prowess, specifically Pavel's portrayal of Babe. Pavel was really able to embody those feelings of loss and betrayal that Babe was experiencing throughout the series. The way he would contort his face in pain and heartache, the way he would scream and sob without holding back. He did that character justice. I get choked up when I think about how far he's come since Two Moons 2. He has a special place in my heart for sure. Approximately 6 episodes in, I found myself deeply invested in Jeff and Alan. It's like a switch was flipped and suddenly I understood. Their dynamic is archetypal in the sense that you have the angsty younger one who's a bit of a brat and the caring older one that's not quite hip to things. But they managed to portray their relationship in a way that wasn't infantilizing or cringy. To me, that was unique. And they were just so damn cute together. I love that scene in episode 6 where Alan apologizes to Jeff using the poster board and Jeff makes fun of him for being such a millennial. Another scene I love is when they go on their roller skating date in episode 11. So good. I'm certainly looking forward to their storyline in season 2. Another aspect of this series I loved were the action sequences. I appreciated their execution from a technical standpoint, and I thought the stunt work was amazing. In fact, the fight choreography in tandem with the stunt driving is what made Pit Babe so exciting. All the motion that was at play, all the adrenaline, it made for an edge-of-your-seat experience, at least for me. The way they filmed the big shootout in the finale with the fast cuts and close-up shots was a great visual depiction of the characters' anxiety and discombobulation. I will say I was puzzled by the manner in which Wei died because it seemed totally preventable. Why did they let him bleed out on the floor? Go to the hospital. At the same time, his alleged death felt like the only possible redemption for the unforgivable acts he perpetuated. Basically, he had to die. Allegedly. I have some narrative highlights from this series I want to briefly discuss. Emphasis on briefly or we'll be here all day. The first is Kenta's internal struggle with craving fatherly love from Tony, but also harboring guilt for his role in the man's crimes. Unlike the rest of the adopted children, Kenta has no powers, and this has been a major insecurity for him since he was young. To compensate for his lack of power, he does whatever Tony orders him to do, even if it means being complicit in the abuse of children. He himself is a victim of abuse and regularly takes beatings from Tony if things don't go according to plan. But still, he wants to be called his son. He wants Tony to praise him, to look at him kindly, but things never really pan out in his favor. Eventually, he comes to terms with the fact that Tony will never love him, and from there, he has to make the decision whether to continue on as his lapdog or to conspire with the other side to take him down. Morally, Kenta is in a tough space. He was indoctrinated into this life. It's all he's ever known, and he's seen little of the world outside of Tony's control. I was so invested in the possibility of him breaking free, but I never expected him to be the one to kill Tony. That is symbolism if I've ever seen it. Delivering karma in the form of Tony's own sword stabbing him in the back was Kenta's personal redemption. A smaller but just as crucial highlight for me was Jeff and his psychic abilities. He carries the burden of knowing too much, and as a result, he tends to distance himself from others. It's a coping mechanism, this brash persona he puts on. If he doesn't let anybody in, then he won't have to deal with losing anybody later. It's simple math. However, Jeff's secrecy presents us with a more complex question. Is he at fault for concealing the future? Because he knows the gist of what's going to happen, and instead of letting the team know, he and Charlie attempt to remedy things on their own. There were several instances throughout the series where I said, why don't they just devise a plan together instead of going rogue on all these side quests? It should be noted that Tony is searching for Jeff because his power is so profitable, so perhaps their stubbornness to do things their way stems from not wanting others to get involved and hurt. The moral dilemma of it is just so fascinating to me. My one criticism of this series is that the resolution didn't feel like a resolution, and maybe it's because they're planning to elaborate on certain things in the second season. However, standing on its own, the ending did feel rushed. I personally wanted to see more of the snowball effect that Tony's crimes had on the system as a whole. After all, wouldn't it be earth-shattering news for a group of business moguls to be exposed for participating in a human trafficking ring? When it comes to Way's funeral, Babe's reconciliation with his father, and the Charlie Babe Alon Jeff double date, they pretty much nailed that bittersweet tone. But still, what about the world outside of their echo chamber? They didn't fall out of a coconut tree. Even so, enjoyed isn't a strong enough word to describe how I feel about this series. It's a part of my brain chemistry at this point. Well, those were my top 8 BL series of 2024. For me, these rankings always come down to timing. Ultimately, if it's what I need at that moment, it's going to stick with me. Please leave a comment telling me what BLs, GLs, and queer shows you enjoyed this year, because I feel like I've been so out of the loop. What are people even watching? Anyway, thank you to the moon and back for watching this video, and thank you for all your support in 2024. Will I have more than 3 uploads in 2025? Your guess is as good as mine. In the meantime, I encourage you to go over and subscribe to Lovecast. We're fighting tooth and nail to surpass 10K subscribers. Help us out if you so desire. Okay, promo's over. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll reconvene in the next video. Bye!